Again, we've extracted that destroy action into its own file. And we were able to do that because we updated our router to listen and respond to different form request types. All right, makes sense? So now, well, actually, here's a cool thing. If I try to create a new note, I bet this fails because, again, we've tweaked our router. Do we get, yes, we get a sorry page not found. And this makes sense if you think about it. We are now submitting a post request to /note/create. But if I go into our router here, well, we're not listening for a post request. We're still using that old get request. Okay, so we have one request to show the form to create a note, but then I will create a new route that instead listens for a post request to this URI. And yeah, if you want, you can keep this URI we have. Remember, there's no real rules. You can do whatever you want, but try to follow conventions whenever you can. And as it turns out, common RESTful conventions would say, if you want to add a new note, then you should make a post request to the notes resource. That's the way we do it. Okay, and then for the action name, well, we would call it store, again, by common convention. It doesn't have to be store, but usually it is. And it's very helpful if you adopt these conventions because later, if somebody joins your team or you join a different team, if you're all kind of working with the same playbook, it becomes that much easier to instantly grok or grasp the code base. Okay, cool. So now if we come back, let's add a new controller here. And I'm just going to say hello to make sure that we are hitting this action. All right, let's go down to our views, into create, and yeah, now our form will submit a post request to notes. All right, let's give it a shot. Come back. All right, let's give it a shot. Come back to Firefox. Come back, refresh, try to submit the form, and there we go. Now we're hitting that new controller. Awesome. Okay, so once again, we can clean things up. I can go back to notes/create and grab this right here, remove it, and place it within our new store action. There we go. I no longer need this conditional, so we are reducing indentation, which is good. And this is what we end up with. So it looks like I still need my DB class. Let's go ahead and grab that right up here. And yeah, I think this looks pretty good. So we validate the request, and actually real quick, let's add our errors initialization. And if we have no errors, we can insert the note into the database, and then finally, we can redirect the user wherever they need to go. How about /notes? And then we're done here so we can die. Otherwise, if we reach this point, we have some kind of validation issue, don't we? So yeah, we could take this flow, but often I like to check for the problems first, and then the happy path can go at the bottom. So with that in mind, we could say, well, if errors is not empty, then the validation issue is here. Otherwise, we can continue on with the happy path right here. Okay, so what should we do in the case that we have a validation issue? Well, we could redirect somewhere, or we can just return the view just like we did before. And then I will return that. All right, so this action or controller handles persisting a new note to the for. And then I will return that. All right, so this action or controller handles persisting a new note to the database, and that's all. If I return to the create action for a note, this one is now responsible for displaying a form to create the note. So it ends up being a lot simpler. And in fact, we don't even use the database here. So I can inline our errors variable, and that's all we have here. It's actually pretty simple. All right, so let's give it a shot. Back to the browser, we will create a brand new note. We persist it. That hits our new controller. We now see it here. We can view it. We can delete it, which also hits our destroy action. Everything's working, and again, this was made possible because we extended our router to respond to different request types. Okay, so hopefully you're feeling comfortable. I'm going to pull the rug out from you one more time because we need to talk about service containers, or at least a very basic service container in the next episode. Stay tuned. All right, hi everybody. I don't want to do this, but we should talk person to person for just 1 minute. I don't mean I don't want to talk to you, but I get it. You want to see the code. I do too. I can relate, but we still need to talk about one quick thing. We will be discussing the service container in this video. And I want to talk to you because we're starting to creep into more complex territory that you don't necessarily need to build yourself, and yet I still want you to understand the basic premise and the basic concept. So really, if you think about it, all of the things we've been building over the last 10 episodes or so, like even validation. But our router, our database class, this container, we're going to add an app class. Once you start using a framework like Symfony or Laravel, they will provide these things for you for free. That's why it's called a framework. It gives you everything you need. So even though I'm showing you how to build some of these things, in real life, most of the time you're not really going to maintain these yourself. You're going to use off-the-shelf tools that are, to be honest, way, way better. You shouldn't, in most cases, you shouldn't build your own. And yet I'm still showing you because, again, I want you to have a general understanding of what's going on here, rather than it being some kind of black box that you don't really understand. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to show you how to build a container in this lesson, and we can make it as complicated or as simple as we want. But still, if it feels a little too much or a little too overwhelming, just remember, in the future, you won't be building this yourself. So if you just want to skip over it even, nobody's going to judge you. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to switch into PHP Storm. And if I go into, for example, my controller, notes, destroy action, you will remember in a bunch of places we have code just like this, where we need to instantiate our database class in order to execute some SQL. Okay, so keep in mind that each time we instantiate database, we also have to build up the necessary configuration to pass to the constructor. And you'll remember we set that configuration right here. But yeah, my point is, it's just a little annoying that I have to redo this every single time I want to perform a database query. So we have it here, here, we have it here, and then, yeah, we have it there again. It's just a waste. And as you can imagine, for real applications, this will constantly be a concern, not just for a database class, but for everything. You will constantly have objects that require a lot of configuration or a lot of tweaking in order to instantiate. You might need a certain public key or a private token, or you'll have to instantiate a dependency of a dependency to pass it in here. And it gets very time consuming. So instead, it would be nice if I could just do this a single time and then throw it in a container of sorts. Like just throw it in there, and then if I need it, I can take it out of the container. That's what we're going to build in this video. So I keep using this word container That sounds like a pretty good name for our class. So I will do that now. And I'll call it container, and PHP Storm will auto-create the class for me. And then I did say we'll need to add things to the container and then remove them from the container. And in fact, I really like this super simple 5-year-old terminology. However, again, just in the spirit of future frameworks you might use, why don't we change these to bind something into the container or add, and then resolve to grab things out of the container. So a little more complex, but also, again, immediately familiar once you graduate to a framework like Laravel. Okay, so what's the next step? All right, so let's do this. I'd like some kind of playground. So I'm going to create a new file, and we will call it bootstrap.php. And then our index file will require it. So for now, why don't we do it right here? Require base path bootstrap.php. Okay. Okay, and we're probably going to keep that file too, but now I have a little playground where I can tinker and figure out how I want to interact with this container. So I know I want to say new container, all right, and that automatically gets imported. And then next, I want to bind things in to the container. And then let's see if I want to work with our database instance, I could use a path to it using the namespace. So I could bind that key to a function that is responsible for building up the database object. That's what we're doing here. So I'm associating this little builder function with a string called core database. Okay, so if I were to go up to any place where we manually did it, like right here, let's switch back and paste it in here. Just like so. All right, and then we will return that from our function. Okay, and real quick, you'll notice that it's gray. Because I haven't set up the method signature on the container class, but we'll do that in just a minute. Okay, so now I can see that we have a string, which would be like an identifier, or a key for this binding. And then we have a function that is responsible for building up the object. It's almost like a little factory function. Okay, so let's do this. Let's open up a split, go into my container class so that you can see these side by side. And we'll say, accept some kind of key. All right, and then the second argument is our function here. Call it whatever you want. Go into my identifier or a key for this binding. And then we have a function that is responsible for building up the object. It's almost like a little factory function. Okay, so let's do this. Let's open up a split, go into my container class so that you can see these side by side. And we'll say, accept some kind of key. All right, and then the second argument is our function here. Call it whatever you want. Some people make it super generic like this. I don't really love that, but you know, if you want to call it your builder or your factory function or your resolver, whatever you want here. Okay, so now when we bind something into the container, think about it. We need to store it somewhere. We need to save it. We need to cache it, just like with the router lesson. So I'm going to take mostly the same approach where I will have a field here called bindings. And then when I call this bind method, I will push to this array, almost identical to, if you want to call it your builder or your factory function or your resolver, whatever you want here. Okay, so now when we bind something into the container, think about it. We need to store it somewhere. We need to save it. We need to cache it, just like with the router lesson. So I'm going to take mostly the same approach where I will have a field here called bindings. And then when I call this bind method, I will push to this array, almost identical to the router class. Okay, so I might do something like this. This bindings, this will be an associative array. I'll give it the key, and I will make that equal to our resolver. Okay, so now if you think about it, the bindings array contains one item at this point. The key for that item is core/database, and the value associated with that item is a function that will build up the database class however is appropriate for your project, as you see here. All right, next within our resolve method, we want to do the opposite, right? We want to take the object out of the container. And how would we do that? Well, we will probably need to call or trigger this function and then return the result, right? Okay, so let's do that now. Resolve should accept a key. And that way I could say, for example, container resolve core database. And then this method would look into our bindings array and say, all right, do we have anything called core/database? Oh, yeah, we do. So let's find the resolver or the function associated with it, call it, that will trigger this code, and then return the result. So in effect, we would have a database instance fully built up and configured, ready to go when we call this method here. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so we might say if array key exists, look for this key inside of the bindings array. In that case, we're good to go. So I could say, well, the resolver is this bindings key, and then I want to call that function. And there's a couple ways to do this, but why don't we stick with call user func. This will accept the name of our function, and it, well, calls it. And then finally, we will return the result. Okay, but now what about the situation where you try to resolve something that is not bound within the container? Something like that. What should happen in this case? Okay, well, maybe we should reverse it. What if we do our guarding at the beginning? And I say, well, if not exists within the bindings, then yeah, we don't know what to do. We can't proceed. We have within the container, something like that. What should happen in this case? Okay, well, maybe we should reverse it. What if we do our guarding at the beginning? And I say, well, if not exists within the bindings, then yeah, we don't know what to do. We can't proceed. We have no idea what you want here. And in those situations, we can throw an exception, something like this: throw new exception. This is provided by PHP, and this is what you should do in exceptional situations. And then later, you can either catch those and respond to them however you need to, or you can just let them happen. Now, when we create an exception, we can give it a reason. So in this case, what is our reason? Well, we couldn't find a matching binding. So maybe, how about that? No matching binding found for your key. And yeah, once again, I can hit Option Enter in PHP Storm and switch that to string interpolation if you like that just a little better. Otherwise, if we get to this point, we're good to go. So I can remove this, then reformat, and yeah, I think we are off to the races. Okay, so we know that we are requiring our Bootstrap class here. So why don't we just I think we are off to the races. Okay, so we know that we are requiring our Bootstrap class here. So why don't we just play around with this? Let's comment this out and then die and dump the database class to see. See if it's working properly. So if I switch to Firefox, there we go. We now have our database instance fully configured and ready to go, which is pretty cool. And yeah, also, if I were to instead resolve something that is not in the container, well, remember, we'd throw a new exception, right? So let's see if that works and what that looks like. I give it a refresh, and there we go. Uncaught exception. So notice when you throw an exception, you do have the option of catching it and then responding in some way, maybe a more graceful way. But I don't want to touch on that just yet. For now, this is fine. We throw an exception to let us know there was no binding for this. We didn't know what to do, so we just aborted entirely. Okay, cool. So I think this is looking good, at least for our first pass. But now, well, we have a new problem. Have a look. If I go into my destroy control, first pass. But now, well, we have a new problem. Have a look. If I go into my destroy controller, well, how do I grab that container, right? Would I be in the exact same boat again where I basically have to build this up over and over? So now I have to do this just to grab my database? No, definitely not. It would defeat the entire purpose. Every time you need to use the container, you have to instantiate it. Why would you do that? Definitely not. But it does show that we need some place to build up our container and then have access to it from anywhere in the application. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to build up an app class. So just come along for the ride for a minute. I'm going to call it app.php. And I'm going to add a static method here called setContainer. Quick refresher just in case you forgot. A static method is one that can be called without having to first instantiate an object. So for example, with this method being static, I can then say app set container, just like that. If I did not have static here, yeah, of course I would have to build up a new instance of app, and then I could say, app set container. Okay, so let's keep it as static for now because this is going to be super helpful. Now, it's going to accept our container, and then I will store it. So why don't we create a static property called container, and then I will initialize it. Static container equals container. All right, so now when I call this method, I give it my container object, and all it does is it saves it on this property. It's the only thing it does right now. All right, next I need to get the container so I can interact with it, right? So why don't we do this? Let's copy this method. And yeah, if you want, you could call it get. I guess that would be consistent and it's very common, but I don't really love using the get prefix if I don't have to. Why don't we just name it container? And all this is going to do is it will return this value here. It's going to return the container to me. Okay. Okay, so now from anywhere in my application, I have this app class. And if I say app container, I get access to the container and I can then interact with it. And this is an example of a singleton, but again, jargon, terminology, you don't need to worry about it right now. Okay, so let's give this a shot. And actually, real quick, can't forget to add the namespace here. All right, so I will come back to Bootstrap. So here we've instantiated our container. We've added our first binding, and don't forget, in real life, you'll do this dozens of times, potentially. And now I want to set the container like so, and I will pass that in. And do note that I have imported app at the top automatically by PHP Storm. All right, so I know we're covering a lot here. That's why we had that quick conversation at the beginning of the video. If you need to, watch this 2 times, watch it 3 times, just to make sure you fully grok and understand what's going on here. Okay, I think we're ready to try this out. So I'm going to go back to that destroy action on my controller where we were manually building up our database class, and I will comment it out. And instead, I want to say app container, give me the container, and then I want to, well, let's see what we want to do. On my container class, I want to resolve my database instance. So I say resolve, and then we give it a path to the class or the key that I want to resolve out of the container. And once again, I'm just going to die and dump the DB class to make sure that everything's working the way we'd expect. that everything's working the way we'd expect. All right. And then let's go to notes. And I'm sorry, we don't even have a note here. Let's add one super quick. We view it, we click delete, that will hit our destroy controller, and then we should die and dump the database object, and everything is working. Very, very cool. Okay, so now if we did everything correctly, all of this stuff here can now be replaced with our container. App container resolve our database. Pretty cool. And in fact, if you want, I'll show you a little tip. Notice how I am manually writing out the path to our database class. But as it turns out, if you just reference the class name itself and then : class, that will basically translate to a string of the full namespace path to the class. And if you even want to inline it, you could do this. And that way you get some auto-completion, some IntelliSense. You might prefer that. It's still going to work the same. Okay. Cool. But now I want to focus on some creature comforts. It would be nice if I didn't have to say app, container, resolve, database. Wouldn't it be cool if I could just say like app, resolve, and then it just works? And real quick, by the way, I would almost always import this, so I will bring that back. But yeah, wouldn't it be cool if I could just say app resolve, and then the app class would delegate to the container class and give me what I need? Okay. The problem is right now, the resolve method is defined on container. give me what I need. Okay. The problem is right now, the resolve method is defined on container right here and not on app. But think about it. You're in charge. Is there anything preventing you from just having a static method here called resolve, and then you give it the key? No. And if you're instead thinking, well, there's nothing preventing you, but you're adding a bunch of duplication. No, I'm really not. I'm not reproducing everything I have here. I'm just deferring. I'm delegating. So the app class can say, okay, well, let's grab our container, and then I will call resolve and pass through the key. You see how it's just kind of passing it through? App is just, it's adding an affordance here. Yeah, you can call resolve, and if you do, I'm just going to delegate it over to the container class. It just makes for a more, I don't know, friendly and intuitive API to access it directly off of the app class. Okay, so with that in mind, maybe we should do the exact same thing for bind. Bind, and then of course I will need a resolver. Okay, cool. And again, those delegate. Okay, and then of course I want to return the result here. Okay, so now if I come back to our destroy controller, yeah, ideally, hopefully, this will just work. Let's give it a shot. View the node, click delete, and everything works just like it did before, but now we are resolving things out of the container, which means, yeah, I can switch over to any place I was referencing this before and swap out that instantiation with a reference to our container, as you see here. I was referencing this before and swap out that instantiation with a reference to our container, as you see here. So let's do that. I can switch over to any place I was referencing this before and swap out that instantiation with a reference to our container. As you see here. So let's do that. Paste this one in as well. Is there one? One here. Yes, there is. There we go. All right, so we're about done here. But finally, to wrap up, some quick closing thoughts. Yeah, just keep in mind that the container we've built here is incredibly simple on purpose to demonstrate the general pattern. But yeah, once you graduate to a dedicated service container that, for example, Laravel provides, you will find that it does so much more. It has support for singletons, where you get the same instance no matter how many times you resolve it. And that would be very useful in the example of our database class here, by the way. It also has support for things like automatic dependency resolution, which is a fancy term that just means there are situations where you wouldn't even need to specify how to build up an object. The container could possibly do it for you auto-magically, to use a made-up word there. And yeah, basically it will look at the class, and then it will look at the dependencies on the constructor. And then don't forget, each dependency could have its own dependency, and those sub-dependencies could have their own dependencies. And yeah, the container could recursively go through each of those and build it all up on the fly. And it's really cool, but far beyond the scope of a beginner series. So yeah, this is the container that we're going to stick with for now. And hopefully it was useful to you. Finally, our app class provided a way to basically make this container singleton available anywhere within our application. All right, so please do ask your questions below. Otherwise, onward to the next lesson, as always. All right, welcome back, everybody. Okay, so we have one more episode to complete our first Notes CRUD app, or resource if you like. And then after that, we can move on to sessions and authentication, which should be a lot of fun. Okay, so let's dig in right now. If I switch to my browser, here's our Notes section. And yeah, we can create an example note, and that works fine. We can view all of them. We can view a specific note. We can delete a note, but yeah, we can't yet edit and update a note. And that's what we will do in this episode. All right, so let's go into our browser and yeah, let's do this. Maybe we can actually, if I switch back real quick, maybe we can reuse this form here. Okay, so this is the create page. So I will go into views, notes, create, and I'm going to copy and duplicate this, and we will call it edit.view. Okay. So now if I go into, actually, let's start at the route level. Let's say listen for, let's grab this one right here. Listen for /note/edit, and that will load a controller called notes/edit. All right, that's our next step, create the controller. So once again, let's take something we already have and duplicate it.